Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Peachy from your WCA biology class, and I'm going to be doing an online video tutorial for you for preparation for your final exam, which will be your human body test. So I'm going to go through the study guide and kind of go through and explain a lot of the questions and hopefully answer some questions that you might have. So the first question is, what is an impulse? An impulse is an electrical signal that travels along an axon. There's a difference in charge between the inside of the axon and the outside of the axon. And what happens then is that there's a lot of different ions that are moving, potassium and sodium. We call it the salty banana. They're kind of moving back and forth to create a differential in sodium and potassium ions, and that basically is what kind of gets the whole thing started. And once that nerve impulse exists, you have something called an action potential, which is a short-lasting event in which the electrical membrane potential of a cell rapidly rises, and that's due to the exchange of sodium and potassium ions. Following a consistent trajectory, action potentials occur in several types of animal cells called excitable cells, which include neurons, muscle cells, and endocrine cells. Okay, so that's what kind of gets like a nerve impulse is what kind of gets a nerve signal going. So it's the very first part. What's the function of the large intestines? The large intestines primarily is removing water from your which you've eaten, getting it back into the bloodstream. It also is where a lot of the minerals and stuff and vitamins are absorbed in the large intestines. You also have a lot of bacteria living in your large intestines, and they will start to break down some indigestible things, some things that we cannot digest, like cellulose, which is found in plant cells, and then they produce, as a result of that digestion, they will produce gas. And that's something that occurs in our gut, but it helps with that digestive process. The problem is that we have starch. We have insoluble starch that will actually suck up a lot of the water that we've eaten, that comes out of our food, and it makes your stool very loose. And we also, like the large intestines is absorbing some water, but too much water left in the stool will give us diarrhea. But if there's not enough, you get constipation. So there has to be this delicate balance. And so those bacteria that help break down some of that fiber actually help with that balance as well. It says, compare and contrast the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the brainstem and spinal cord. And so that's kind of at the center of your body, right? And the peripheral nervous system is all the nerves that come out from there. The central nervous system is made up of primarily they're made up of primarily interneurons. This part I was trying to remember. So basically, the peripheral nervous system is going to have sensory and motor neurons. So sensory neurons are going to first be able to detect the input, the stimulus that causes this response, and it's going to send a message down the axons to the interneurons that are made up of the central nervous system. There is both gray matter and white matter in the central nervous system, and it just depends on whether or not the neurons have a myelinated sheath or they're not myelinated. So this has almost like a covering on it that helps to increase the action potentials. So white matter has myelinated axons, and gray matter does not. So myelination means that it has almost like a sheath on it, like you would in a wire. And that actually, it's not one continuous sheath, it's like little bits, so it kind of creates these little areas of increased, voltage as you go down the nerve line. so that helps to transmit the signal. And those are all found in the central nervous system. So that interneuron processes the information and sends a message back to be received by the motor neurons, which are part of the peripheral nervous system. And the motor neurons will actually move. Somehow you're going to have some motion with that. So peripherals are sensing and moving, and the central nervous system is actually processing and coming up with like an answer, essentially, to that. What in the stomach break down proteins? That's an enzyme called peptase, and they break proteins into amino acids. Proteins are broken into amino acids. What is the esophagus? It's a tube. It runs down next to your trachea, and it goes down to your stomach. And in the tube, it is lined with smooth muscle, and it helps you swallow your food. And a process called peristalsis occurs, whereas you actually have these kind of regularly squeezing and contracting muscle contractions right after each other to help get that food into your stomach. All right, so next we have neurons. Neurons are cells of the nervous system. And neurons have a cell body, and then they have axons and dendrites. The nerve cell body is where you're going to find like the nucleus, and that's kind of the part of the cell that does most of the stuff. And then you have an axon, which is like the trunk of the tree with the little roots at the bottom. And then you have the dendrites, which are more like the branches of the tree. So the axons, the signal travels down the axon, and then it jumps across from one axon to another nerve cell's dendrite. And then there's a little space between them, and they call that a synapse. And what happens is like you have a lot of electricity building up on one axon, and after a while, the potential is there. So you have some potential energy. And so what happens is that the electricity jumps across from axon to dendrite. There's space, though, remember, between them? Between that space, there's fluid, and in that fluid is things called neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters, their job is to either to facilitate that movement or to stop it. So if they facilitate that movement, they help make that nerve signal transfer. If they stop it, then they stop it. And a lot of times, like pain medication and stuff, helps to stop the signals, because that's kind of its function, is to stop the pain signal. Whereas other types of signals, such as those that tell you to feel good and relax and things like that, are facilitated by, or there are medications that facilitate that response, so that we, take things like Prozac or Zoloft or something to help to increase that response. So the difference between a saturated and an unsaturated fat depends upon the hydrogens that are attached to it. If you look at the chemical structures of them, let me just show you a picture. Okay, so this is showing you the chemical structure. You can see that in a saturated fat, there's no spaces for hydrogens to go. In an unsaturated fat, we've got some spaces, but that's primarily because there's a double bond here between the two carbons, okay? So it's got a double bond here. That's a difference, but it's also missing two hydrogen ions as well. So that is one of the differences. As far as what they look like, saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Things like butter and lard and stuff are saturated fats. Even candle wax is considered a saturated fat. And then we have unsaturated fats, which are liquid at room temperature, like margarine, like oil, olive oil, and vegetable oils are liquid at room temperature. We already did the compare and contrast the interneurons and the motor neurons and sensory neurons. Remember the mnemonic device to help remember the organs in the digestive system. My pink elephant still smells like rotten apples. That's mouth, your throat, which is your pharynx, your esophagus, stomach, small intestines, large intestines, anus, and rectum. Those are the order of the digestive organs. Homeostasis means that everything is kind of staying in balance in your body, whether that is the amount of carbon dioxide to the amount of oxygen in your bloodstream, or the amount of glucose that you require to be able to produce the right amount of ATP to keep your body functioning. that your blood pressure stays at a rate that is, kind of healthy and doesn't overtax your heart. All sorts of things have to maintain homeostasis in your body. It's a state of equilibrium. Mechanical and chemical digestion. Well, mechanical digestion is like physical weathering, basically. You're chewing things up, you're breaking them up physically, but they're not changing their chemical structure. Chemical digestion includes the change of the actual molecule. You're actually breaking bonds and forming new bonds. So, for example, carbohydrates, starches in your mouth, will break down using the enzyme amylase, and it will break up into glucose molecules. Okay? So they're actually becoming something different. They're just rearranging those atoms. Macro and micronutrients. Let's going to go through those as well. So this is going to be macronutrients that you need. Okay, so these actually are produced by plants for the most part. So we have macronutrients. You have protein, carbohydrates, and fats are your macronutrients along with water. So protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And micronutrients, let me see here. Those would be like vitamins and minerals. Micronutrients would be like vitamins and minerals. Okay? Things like vitamin A and vitamin C, vitamin K, minerals such as calcium, even different minerals such as sodium, for example. There's still a necessary amount of sodium, iodine. Those things are considered micronutrients. And what is the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus is part of the brain, and it controls the pituitary. So the pituitary is the master gland that is going to control the whole endocrine system, but it is controlled by the hypothalamus itself. And in what 3 ways do the kidneys maintain homeostasis? They look at the amount of water in your body. So if you have too much water, they produce a diuretic, and they actually take some of that water and you pee it out. If you are dehydrated, they produce an antidiuretic, and they put that water back into the bloodstream. So they're maintaining the hydration. That's a homeostasis state. They maintain the pH of the blood, and they maintain the amount of waste products in the blood. So specifically urea, ammonia in the blood. Okay. All right, so that's the first part of this human anatomy review. We're going to come back with part 2 in just a minute, so stay tuned for the next video session, and we'll go through the second part of the study guide.